My sister-in-law poisons my food, which ends up eating her husband, ends up divorced, and in jail. I am 29 years old, have been married to my husband, Harry. For the past 7 years, I love everything about our marriage, except the fact that he is related to his sister Kayla, who brings all the negativity into our lives. She is incredibly negative, manipulative, and toxic. I have worked hard for years to avoid crossing her path because I know what kind of person she is in the past. My husband had dated my sister-in-law's best friend when he was 17, and later they broke up because he felt he was pressured to be with her by my sister-in-law when he turned 23 and found himself single. His sister insisted that he and her friend should be together, but he refused. They had a huge fight, and she went crying to her parents about how she wanted him to marry someone she was comfortable with. But her parents didn't really listen to her when my husband and I first met and fell in love. His parents were very understanding. My sister-in-law always treated me coldly whenever she was around. She would always bring up Harry's ex-girlfriends for no reason and tell him how they were doing so well and how he should get back in contact with them. This continued for a while, and I was not the only one who found this strange, as Harry also found it strange, so he would ask her not to continually bring up his ex-girlfriends. My sister-in-law would get angry and start making fun of me, saying that I was getting jealous, and that I shouldn't be with an insecure person like me when his parents would invite us over for dinner. My sister-in-law would intentionally bring one of Harry's ex-girlfriends over, telling us how she had bumped into them that day by accident, and that she should invite them over for dinner out of courtesy too. He checks my Instagram relentlessly. Although he doesn't follow me, I have a public account. So I've noticed, how is the first person to see my story? If a guy comments on my picture, then goes to his brother and complains about how I was posting inappropriate pictures. Harry and I were literally laughing at her accusations when Harry and I decided to move in together. She urged Harry to break up with me, telling him that I was very flawed as a woman and that she could find someone much better than me. This comment honestly hurt me, as I had been nothing but nice to her at all times, unfortunately. As soon as Harry and I got engaged, my sister-in-law's behavior towards me got even worse. When Harry and I were announcing our engagement, everyone started congratulating us. I noticed Ka was very, and then she got up from her chair and left our party to everyone's surprise. Later, she called Harry, crying and yelling about how she didn't appreciate being told the news with everyone else, as she thought he was the most close to her. So I deserved to have been the first to know about her engagement. Then she sent me a text that bordered on threatening, saying how I should be a good wife to her brother, since she had always been the only woman in his life. The text was so strange that I was almost embarrassed. I didn't even bother to respond and left her message unread. What I know must have made her even more angry. My sister-in-law began gradually ignoring me whenever she saw me. But for some reason she was still involved in all the wedding activities, like when I went shopping for dresses and had my bachelorette party. She took her criticism of the wedding to a whole new level, openly expressing her displeasure with my choices, despite both my future mother-in-law and my fiancé pointing out her behavior several times. Her behavior persisted one day, while I was discussing the centerpiece with my future mother-in-law. Kayla immediately heard and started mocking me, saying how my wedding was not classy and how that's why she wanted her brother to marry someone better. That was the heartbreaking point for me, and I lost my composure. I yelled at her that I could not tolerate her constant mockery and criticism any longer, and made it clear to her that she was not invited to our wedding. Kayla was shocked in disbelief, as if she had never expected me to stand up to her. Even my mother-in-law was furious with her and supported me later. Kayla approached Harry, complaining about how I had embarrassed her and insisting that he should control me since I was going to be his wife. Harry firmly told her that he supported my decision, and that if she did not apologize, she would not be invited to the wedding. She reluctantly sent me a sincere apology that I saw. And again, I left Yoon red with my wedding preparations already. I was exhausted and did not want to involve me in her drama. In the end, she ended up coming to our wedding because she didn't want me to talk badly about her later. Now my wedding had a certain theme of pink tones and pastels that everyone seemed to follow without problems, including the guests. However, my sister-in-law showed up wearing a long dress, or to the black floor with a veil as if she was coming for a funeral. We were left in socks, to say the least. My sister-in-law went around telling people how she was mourning, losing her brother with another woman during the reception. My husband could see that I was uncomfortable with my sister-in-law's wedding outfit and confronted her about it. She tried to play the victim, saying that she had the right to dress how she wanted, and that I was too controlling. In the end, my mother-in-law and father-in-law asked her to leave when she kept making a fuss. It was humiliating for me, and since that day I have avoided crossing paths with her when I gave birth to my son Nate. I refused to allow my sister-in-law to be near our baby. She tried to argue it out, but my husband and his parents supported me. They understood exactly why I didn't want my sister-in-law near my baby, and they respected my decision 2 years ago. My sister-in-law had a miscarriage with her then-boyfriend Yaimi, and completely destroyed her. It was really a sad time for everyone. Harry and I felt bad for her, as we already had a child. So after her miscarriage, we decided to be a little more understanding. The beginning seemed to have changed, but over time she was back to her old self. She is always talking about how hard her life is, how things never seem to work out for her, blaming ex-boyfriends or ex-friends for ruining things in her life over time. I have noticed that in her head she is never wrong. She rarely admits any mistakes and conflicts, and constantly tries to get people on her side, playing the victim card this year. She decided to get married and invited everyone except us. Harry was shocked to find out that we were not invited when we asked her about it. She started saying how she couldn't allow me to come because I might do something to upstage her wedding. I called and I asked her why she would think something like that, when I have never done anything to her. Kayla started telling how she had decided to wear all black at our wedding. So now she was afraid that I would do the same thing. And that is why she did not want me to be at her wedding. I was furious at how manipulative she was, and I told it clearly to my husband. Harry spoke to his parents, and they decided to tell my sister-in-law that they would neither pay for the wedding nor attend. This reduced my sister-in-law to tears, and she started blaming me for creating this mess. My husband informed her that she had blatantly admitted her own mistake, so she had no right to point the finger at me. But Kayla justified her action by saying that our wedding had been a long time ago and that I should get over it later. Like my father-in-law and mother-in-law still refused to pay for her wedding, she came over to apologize to me and beg me. I'm sorry, I hate to admit it, but Kayla can be very sweet and persuasive when she wants something. I forgave her and just wanted to put the past behind her. Wedding with Jamie went well. We all attended and had a good time. I don't even know, months later Kaya was at our door complaining about how her marriage was falling apart. Harry and I let her stay with us for a few days, where she would vent for hours about her husband seemed to be having trouble getting pregnant, and Kaya clearly blamed Yaimi for everything. I tried to talk to Kayla, but she was determined that everything was her husband's fault. When she wasn't complaining about her husband, she was hyper-focused on our lives and tried to make up things that didn't exist. For example, I usually go to the gym every morning before I go to work. Sometimes when I'm late, I wear my work clothes so I can finish my workout shower and change my clothes. My sister-in-law noticed this for a while and made me many questions about it, like why I was taking a bath or why I even needed to go to the gym. I didn't give it much thought, and I told her how I like to maintain my weight and how I don't like going to the office all sweaty. She pursed her lips and nodded. Eventually, things worked out with Jamie and she moved back in with him on a weekend. My husband and I went to lunch with my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law had also been invited. My sister-in-law and Yaimi left our son Nate with a babysitter. Since normally he got bored when we adults talked for hours, and he wanted to stay home and play. During lunch, my mother-in-law was telling us about how one of her friends is currently divorced. She was telling us how her friend's husband was unfaithful to her, so she left him and took half of his assets. Suddenly, my sister-in-law interrupted to ask my husband if he and I had signed a prenuptial agreement before we got married. We stopped eating to look at her, and she acted like I wasn't even there, and looked at my husband expectantly. Now my husband is not one to beat around the bush, so he said, like, clearly we both win. Pretty good. We saw no reason to make a prenuptial agreement. My sister-in-law snorted and started saying how there are a lot of cheaters these days around us and that he could be fooled at any moment. I took offense at his words and asked him to tell us exactly what he was implying. My sister-in-law began to say how I was definitely meeting someone because I always carried a change of clothes everywhere, and that as Harry's sister it was her duty to warn her brother. I was stunned. Upon hearing these words, the father and my father-in-law and mother-in-law immediately came to the rescue and launched themselves against her so that she would stop making up things and not stick her nose in other people's business. My sister-in-law, without missing a beat, continued saying how I was just trying to be there for her brother, and joked, If our son Nate really was Harry's son, since he did not exactly look like him, I swear. I saw my husband's face turn red with anger. I had never seen him so angry in my life. He looked Kayla straight in the eyes and told her that that's why she wasn't a mother yet, because she didn't deserve to be one, and that her child would be better off in heaven than with someone like her. Kaaya's mouth was hanging in shock. My mother and father-in-law just stared silently at my husband and launched at Kayla about how she was a shameless person, trying to ruin everything because she had nothing good in her life, and how she was just a married loser who did nothing all day while her husband worked hard all day. She kept saying that instead of pointing at me and asking us about prenups, she should worry about her own marriage, as she was clearly projecting. Kayla was reduced to tears and began to sob. She looked at Yaimi, who was sitting right next to her, for support, but he didn't say a word. I had never seen my husband lose control like this at the end. He got up from his chair to go to the bathroom. My husband was furious. My mother-in-law came to calm my husband down while I rubbed his hand. He told me how sorry he was for what his sister had told me about our son, and I nodded because I understood how it could be. She was quite glad that my husband stood up for me so publicly, as he had put up with enough from Kayla over the years. After he calmed down, he apologized to Yaimi, but completely ignored Kayla. After lunch that day, we had no contact with Kayla again. Her behavior was not only affecting me but my husband as well. We just blocked her everywhere so she couldn't contact us. My in-laws talked to us about the lunch, and they agreed that Kayla had gone too far this time. They could see how their usually calm son had gone out of control after Kaaya had been provoking him. It has been a year since we talked to her, and everything has been going well. 2 months ago, I found out that I was pregnant. It was a complete surprise, as we were not even trying to conceive my husband, and I feel blessed to welcome another member of the family. We were waiting for the right time to let everyone know, and decided to reveal it on my husband's birthday. The in-laws wanted to celebrate Harry, so they hosted a big party for him in their backyard. Our relatives and close friends had also been invited. My sister-in-law must have found out about this from others and decided to make an appearance. My husband and I were surprised to see her, especially when my sister-in-law came and hugged Harry, telling him how much she had missed him and how sorry she was for their last conversation. My husband took my hand and told his sister that she should blame herself on me for the things she said last time. My sister-in-law nodded, turning to me, and apologized to me. She told me that she had been going to therapy during the months and had realized how wrong it had been to humiliate me like that. I didn't believe a word she said, but I didn't want to be rude to her in front of everyone, so I just nodded. My in-laws talked to us and told us that they had no idea she was coming, assuring us that if we didn't feel comfortable, they would kick her out, because this was a party for my husband. But Harry didn't want to make a scene, so we agreed to let him go throughout the party. I could see my sister-in-law laughing and mingling with everyone, which was a little odd. She seemed overly positive, which was not her characteristic at all, but she had mentioned going to therapy, so I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt when it came time to cut the cake. Harry gave a moving speech about how he considered himself the luckiest man in the world. Thankful for another year with a wife like me, his words made me blush with joy, and I couldn't avoid appreciating the fact that my husband and I are still deeply in love, just as we were when we started dating all those years ago. Then, Harry and I decided to share some exciting news with everyone with smiles on our faces. We announced that we were expecting. We had a baby, and everyone took a moment to process it before exclaiming in happiness. My mother started crying and came to hug me. My in-laws also had tears in their eyes as they congratulated me and Harry. Everyone was so happy for us, and excitedly asked us if we had thought of names for the baby. The only discordant note was my sister-in-law, who looked at us stunned. I thought maybe she was taking a moment to process it, but then her expression changed and she just walked away from us, looking angry. I was a little worried, thinking if I was going to ruin another celebration for us, but I got distracted by other people who came up to talk to me when it was time to serve lunch. I saw my sister-in-law came up to me smiling. She had a plate of food in her hands and she handed it to me, announcing loudly that she personally wanted to serve me food because she was so happy for me pregnancy. As she handed me the plate, she even made a comment about how she wanted to make up for all the time she had been rude to me in the past. I nodded and graciously agreed, and then walked away. I was about to start eating, but luckily I noticed that she had put shrimp on my plate. It is a fact pretty well known in my family that I am allergic to shrimp. so I was surprised that my sister-in-law even served me this. I shook my head, disappointed, and got up to get my own food. At that moment, Yaimi came over to congratulate me on my pregnancy. We talked a bit, and he asked me why I wasn't eating. I pointed out how my sister-in-law had served me shrimp, probably by mistake. So Yaimi told me not to worry and took the plate from my hands. She told me that she could keep that plate since she liked to eat shrimp and that I could get a new plate for myself. I smiled, nodded, and I walked away. Not even an hour passed when Yaimi started feeling sick. Everyone stopped eating, worried, and looked at him as he tried to get up from his seat. Harry and Kaya ran up to him. Worried, Jamie pointed to his plate, and then his throat shocked us, as we understood that something was clearly wrong with him from what he had eaten. Kayla ran to check his plate and his eyes went wide. He turned to look at me and asked if I had given my plate to her husband, and I felt in the middle of the chaos. Someone called an ambulance, and they rushed him to the hospital. Kayla was crying uncontrollably through all this, and kept looking at me in anger. Later, we were informed that Yaimi had been poisoned. I almost fainted when I heard this, as I knew, unlike the others, that the plate was originally for me. Any poison Yaimi could have ingested could have poisoned me and my baby Harry, my in-laws and my parents. They still have no idea about this. They called the police to take the food he had eaten as evidence, since no one had any idea what was in the food that had caused this. At this time, as I write this, Yaimi is still recovering in the hospital while Kayla stayed with him overnight. My husband and I have been answering calls from family members asking what happened to Jaime and who could have poisoned him. My in-laws are shocked by what happened and are staying at our house because they are afraid to go back to theirs. No one has any idea what happened all of a sudden when everything was going so well. I'm afraid to tell everyone that the dish originally belonged to me, and since Kayla came and served it to me, if this becomes an investigation, I will have to tell the police the truth. I feel extremely guilty about what happened, but most importantly, I am now extremely worried about what my sister-in-law can do to me, since she clearly has no boundaries. I don't want to be around her, nor can I let my kids be around her. Update 1. Wow. Thanks for the thousands of comments on this post in a matter of a few hours. I never imagined I would get so many responses. My hands were shaking when I wrote this before, and I haven't been able to sleep. Despite what everyone keeps saying, I feel some responsibility for the incident. My brother-in-law should have thrown the plate, but I don't know why I let him take it from me. I keep crying, wondering if something is wrong with her. My husband knows something is wrong, and he has been around me. He thinks I'm just a day, but he has no idea what I know about his sister. I agree with the comments that I need to sit down and talk to everyone calmly. I don't know if everyone will believe me, but my in-laws have security cameras installed all over the house. And since this birthday party was happening in their backyard, I'm sure they can check on their cameras that Kayla was the one who offered me that dish. I will talk to everyone tonight, and then I will update 2. Then we talk. And I am very grateful to have the best in-laws of the world since they are already staying with us. I sat down with them and Harry during dinner to tell them that I had something important to tell them. I began by taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation on my shoulders with everyone gathered. I recounted the events of the birthday party, explaining how my sister-in-law served me a plate with shrimp and how Yaimi ate it unknowingly, resulting in her poisoning. As I spoke, I could see their faces. My in-laws exchanged glances. Their concern was evident as Harry's expression went from confusion to anger. I continued expressing my fear about my sister-in-law's motives and her previous attempts to harm me. I admitted my hesitation in sharing this information, fearing the possible consequences for me and our unborn child. My mother-in-law, being the pragmatic woman she was, suggested I immediately review the security camera footage. My father-in-law nodded in agreement, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. Harry, although visibly upset, he remained silent, taking in everything that was happening after reviewing the security footage from his camera app. The truth was undeniable. The images showed my sister-in-law offering me the poisoned dish, and the subsequent events that led to Yaimi's upset. The weight of the evidence left no room for doubt. Harry, now fully aware of his sister's intentions, struggled to contain his anger. My in-laws were horrified by the actions of their daughter, shocked by the measures she had resorted to in order to create chaos. We were stunned into silence as we struggled to understand. Why would she do something like this in the resurgence of this revelation? My in-laws have decided to hand over this evidence to the police, as this is a very serious matter. Then my father-in-law and my husband will meet with Yaimi once they get back. Since he is the one who needs to press charges against my sister-in-law, I have no idea how Yaimi will react, and I want to cry every time I think about how I allowed him to eat from my poisoned plate. I can't sleep or eat properly, because I am so worried about him. I will update when something significant happens. Update 3. Hi. Everyone, I am finally back with an update. I know it has been almost a month since my last update, but I am a pregnant woman who is going through a lot right now. First things first, my in-laws turned the recording over to the police, and after seeing the evidence, she was arrested. Kaaya didn't even deny the charges, as she immediately broke down, admitting everything. My husband spoke to Jaime about what had happened, and Jaime was as shocked as any of us. My husband urged him to press charges against his sister, as this was such a sinister thing to do, and told him that regardless of what he chose to do, he would always be a part of our family. In the end, after Yaimi recovered, she not only decided to press charges but also filed for divorce. Kayla called my in-laws crying and begging them to forgive her. Turns out Kayla is pregnant. She begged them to get her out of jail, trying to manipulate them on how they should do this for the sake of her grandson. My father-in-law firmly told her that they were done spoiling her, and that she should learn to take responsibility for her own actions. My mother-in-law is extremely sad about what is happening to her daughter, but understands that what Kaya did cannot simply be forgiven. The police found evidence that she had tampered with food with the intent to hurt me, which in turn had gone wrong and ended up hurting her husband. She has been charged with multiple crimes related to food, tampering, endangering life, and causing harm. She has been begging Jaime not to accuse her, saying that this was my fault anyway. But luckily Jaime doesn't care, and his mind is set on punishing her. Her court hearing will start soon. I don't think I can escape this time. In the meantime, for all those asking, my son and I are fine. My husband and I have talked, and we plan to sit down with him, tell him the truth. Since we want our son to know and be alert about these situations, I know it will be a difficult conversation, but very necessary with a little one too. I am going for regular ultrasounds every 2 weeks for my pregnancy, as recommended by my doctor. We are not planning to find out the gender of the baby, since we want it to be a surprise. My parents know what happened with Kaaya and have become very protective of me. They are worried that this may affect my psychological well-being during the pregnancy, so they are encouraging me to go to therapy. I agree with them, since even though I act normally, I have developed a deep-rooted fear after what Kaya did to my food, and I am scared to eat any food or anything that I have not prepared myself or my husband. He understands my fear and is there for me every step of the way, so I hope I can overcome this irrational fear. Soon update for Atro. It's been 8 months since my last update. Kayla is currently serving a prison sentence. She was found guilty of the charges. I never attended her court proceedings, but sometimes my in-laws did, and they would tell me how Kayla admitted in court that she had been jealous of me for years, as she never wanted a stranger to marry her brother. She had always dreamed of one of her best friends marrying my husband, so when he first started dating me, he would always try to intimidate me. When we announced that I was pregnant during my husband's birthday party, she was filled with jealousy as she was about to announce her pregnancy too. She had suffered a miscarriage previously, so she wanted to share her good news, but she thought we took away her moment to shine. So that according to her, because of her pregnancy hormones, she got so angry that she mixed a small amount of rat poison in my food. She admitted that she just wanted me to end up in the hospital, but she never wanted to physically harm me or the baby. Of course, the judge didn't believe her pleas, and she was sentenced to prison and will be away from our lives for quite some time. Jamie has also successfully divorced her, so he is finally free too. We have seen him over the months and continue to include him in our family activities whenever we can. He and I have talked, and I have apologized profusely for giving him my plate, but he assured me that it was never my fault. I started crying when I heard that, because I had been repeating it over and over in my head, wishing I had done things differently so that he would never be poisoned. I am glad that Yaimi is okay. Now, as for me and Harry, we have welcomed a baby girl into our family. Despite the lingering shadows of the past, Our daughter's presence has brought warmth and light into our lives. Our son Nate is excited to become a big brother and has been showering his baby sister with affection and love. Watching our children come together fills our hearts with gratitude throughout all of this. My parents and in-laws have been there for us, helping us navigate this new chapter in our lives.